So I think we're good to go. So welcome everybody to a Fireside Chat this morning with Anthony Doherty from Kingspan. Anthony is head of corporate affairs at Kingspan, leading the company's government relations, communications, and stakeholder engagement activities. He was previously general counsel of Kingspan's light, air, water division, and before joining Kingspan, he'd worked in telecoms, investment banking, and law. Kingspan is the global leader in high performance building envelope solutions. Founded in 1965, it was listed on the Dublin Stock Exchange in 1989 and employs 29,000 people across 80 countries. It is present in 17 US states, employing nearly 3,000 people across 32 states. Anthony, good morning. How are you?
Very good morning, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you. I'm really looking forward to this because I know you a while. I've always enjoyed our interactions, our conversations, and I think you've a great story to tell, and I'm really looking forward to. And I think people are going to be really engaged this morning, listening to you and listening about Kingspan and what you do in Kingspan and what happens. So thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning.
Well, thank you, Chris. And I mean, the Kingspan story is a great story. I mean, two brothers started the business at the back of their family pub in 1965, and it has grown from that to 29,000 people across 80 countries. And we're led by an exceptional management team whose vision and drive, leads us forward to the growth that we've seen. And when we posted our results there in February, it was our 11th consecutive year of growth. And I mean, that's just a testament to the management team that we have there. And I suppose the absolute drive and enthusiasm of all our colleagues. So it's a great story to tell. We're very proud of it. We're very proud of our product set. And look, it's looking forward to kind of sharing that with you today.
Yeah, no, I am. I'm really interested to hear about it. I mean, can you describe the company? I mean, what it does and what its presence in Ireland is. What does Kingspan do? Because you have a number of different divisions and you have a very strong presence in Ireland, as you said, since 1965.
We do, surely, and we also have a very strong presence in France as well,
Yeah.
which will be of interest to our colleagues on the call this morning. So, look, our products effectively are building envelope solutions. Now, what does that mean? We have structural insulated panels. So, if you're driving down the motorway and you see the big box warehouses that will
Yeah.
be on either side, they would be made up of panels made steel on each side with rigid foam insulation. Now, why these are important is because they have a great thermal performance, so you're not losing heat or cool, whichever is appropriate, through the walls of the fabric of the building. And also, they're very easy to assemble from a structure perspective. So it's a very quick way of construction. So that would account for a about 70 odd percent of our business. We have rigid foam insulation boards, which are you'll see them in between cavities of blocks, or you'll see them in roof structures of houses. And this is ensure that there's no loss of thermal performance between the outside and the inside of the building. We also have our Advances division, which is our data solutions, light, air, and water division. Now, as you can probably appreciate, Chris, with the data center boom at the moment, this is achieving significant growth. And we've been very fortunate to see that division make some great gains as per our recent trading update. The numbers have been very strong. So really, what does that mean in terms of data solutions? It means that effectively everything that's in a data center that doesn't require a Cat5 cable, we can make it in terms of server rackings, in terms of heating, cooling systems, in terms of smoke dampers, ventilation systems, daylighting solutions, even the tanks for the rainwaters that will be harvested from the roof. We do that. So it's a very exciting space to be in. Um, in terms of Ireland, we've about 1,000 people in Ireland. But if we look to our global presence, France would be our biggest market. We are present in 49 sites across France. We have 2,400 employees over there. And France is our biggest market by sales. So it's a very important market for us. And I think that's reflected in our sports sponsorship as well. We sponsored Toulon Rugby there last August. Very excited to announce that partnership. Tom Dolan, who is sailing at the moment out of France, and he's doing very well over there as well. So we're very closely aligned with the French market.
Yeah. No, it's it's very interesting. 'Cause I remember years ago, I think we had this conversation. If I go back 25 years ago, Kingspan had no presence in France. In fact, if anything, some of the people up in Kingspan just didn't want to get involved in France at the time. But it's amazing how it's changed now. All of a sudden, you're in France with how many sites? You say 49 sites, was it?
47,
47
Chris. And I
sites.
suppose,
Wow.
look, historically, our focus, I mean, if you go back 20, 30, 40 years, it'd be very UK and Ireland focus in terms of our footprint. 2009, we entered into the French market. And I mean, at the same time, in around that period as well, we also started expanding in the Americas. So, I mean, looking at the American footprint, north and south. I mean, we've approximately 600 employees in Canada, another 2,900 south of the border in the US. And if you go further south of that border into Latin America, we're looking at about 1,700 employees from Monterrey in Mexico down as far as Santiago in Chile. So we have a good footprint across the Americas as well. So kind of as far west as Vancouver and as far south as Santiago. So it's a good bit of ground to cover. So to your point, Chris, I mean, we've been very expansive in terms of our growth, and it's one of our key strategic pillars because, we have innovation, we have our planet passionate, but it's also growth and taking a global approach as well. So ensuring that the growth that we've achieved to date expands both in terms of market share and in terms of geographical footprint.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, huge employer in Cavan as well. From 1965, you get to drive around Cavan, you see the plants that you have up there, you see the amount of people who work in, a really good employer as well, in the community there. Yeah.
Well, I'm a Roscommon man originally, but I have become an adopted Cavan man, put it
Yeah.
that way. And I just love it up there, Chris, because I mean, there's
Yeah.
such a great sense of community, and to be part of that is fantastic. And we sponsor Cavan GA, we
Yeah.
sponsor King's Court Stars up there, and I just love walking down the street, seeing kids with Kingspan backpacks, and it gives you a great sense of kind of community pride. It's lovely to be a part of that.
Absolutely. No, I can imagine. So, I mean, Anthony, describe your own role and how you came to be in the role, because this is going to be fascinating. So I'm really interested in this because you've had a varied career and it's pivoted so many times. So can you describe your role and how you came to get into the role?
Well, corporate affairs is, it's a byword for stakeholder engagement, Chris,
Mm.
and you really, particularly when you get to a certain level of scale, you have to ensure that the lines of communication are open with your stakeholders. So who are the stakeholders of, businesses, enterprises operating in various jurisdictions? Principally regulators, legislators, governments, and they have a very difficult job of producing legislation and regulations that balance the needs of everybody in society, of the wider economy, of the taxpayers, of the employers, of all the key stakeholders in industry. And, sometimes they can get it right, and sometimes they can have unintended consequences to what would otherwise be well-meaning regulations. And it's our role to ensure that the voice of industry is being heard. Not that we're pushing an agenda, just so to ensure that they're making a fully informed choice in terms of applying the regulation and the legislation that they're employing. I suppose a textbook example of that at the moment is in the UK. Now, for anyone with a focus on anything made out of metal, um, the UK government have proposed the imposition of 50% steel tariffs on imported steel from the 1st of July.
Right.
Now, that's a well-meaning proposal because their logic there is that they're trying to save British steel producers, and they want, Port Talbot and all these fantastic steel operations across the UK. They want them churning out hand over fist. But the problem with, shall we say, a very quick application of tariffs like that is that when most of your day-to-day steel needs are already imported, there is a gap between the ability of the domestic market to fulfill the domestic needs. And even there would not be the ability of the UK domestic market to provide certain specifications of steel. And what this means is that you have steel fabricators in the UK already at a disadvantage in comparison with shall we say, their French competitors. So
Mhm.
let's say if you're a steel operator in the UK and you're competing against a French competitor for, let's say, in an export market, the fact that you've had a 50% tariff applied to your steel is putting you at a disadvantageous position. Now, bringing that back to where you land in corporate affairs, it's the what do you do when you're somebody like me in a situation like that? You get your subject matter experts together internally. You get the data points. You bring the story together and you identify why, shall we say, certain unintended consequences of a piece of policy might be, shall we say, either not understood or just completely not perceived. And you distill this into kind of like a compelling, shall we say, point that needs to be communicated. You identify the stakeholders that you need to identify with. So let's say industry groups, officials, regulators, politicians, and you convey why it is, that they have a full understanding of the implications of what they're proposing. And it's not that you're bulldozing a particular perspective. It's ensuring that policy is made in contemplation and appreciation of the fullness of all the facts, so that if a policy point is made, it's made with that cognizance, with that understanding that there's an understanding that a black swan doesn't fly out of the left field and they suddenly have impacts for a portion of the UK industry. So that's kind of a role, an example of what would be the kind of the day-to-day role. How I got here, I graduated in 2008, which was terribly bad timing, I have to say. And you'll recall the great term soft landing. So I decided to go back and do a master's for another year and assume that the Irish economy would be okay after that. So the long and the short of it was, in late 2009, I actually went to the Czech Republic. I was working for a law firm out there. They were defending Slovakia in a lot of bilateral investment treaty disputes that were taken by Dutch investors against it. Did that for 2 years. Very great experience, absolutely life-altering experience. Did 3 years of Barclays in London. That was an education in its own right. It was a more effective and a cheaper way than going and doing an MBA, Chris, put it that way. So it was good education there. Spent about 4.5 years with a tech startup that was heavily focused on the northeast of the USA, and then joined Kingspan 7 years ago in a legal capacity. And I have to say I've enjoyed every minute since. I mean, it's a fantastic company. We've got a great team up there in Cavan, and there's just such a good culture of hard work, keeping the head down, and just drive on to grow the business.
No, it's interesting. It's really interesting. I know, actually, when you talked to me, I didn't realize it was 7 years you were in Kingspan. And what's interesting is, if you look at your life cycle, your work cycle, you come from a very corporate background. I would see Kingspan as, okay, they're a huge corporate company, but kind of family business as well. They have that ethos there, that culture still, don't they?
Oh, the culture is fantastic, Chris. I mean, there's just such a great culture. I mean, it's a very fair observation to kind of to describe it in such terms, because I mean, the ethos of the founder, the ethos of our CEO is very much based on values and keeping true to those values, and that permeates throughout the business. That flows all the way down.
Very good. So, going on from that then, so what is the most challenging aspect of your role then, Anthony?
Look, I think the challenging aspect, Chris, of my role is the same as the challenging aspect of anyone dealing with, shall we say, stakeholders across the world. And look, we're in a very challenging set of circumstances globally. I mean, discourse, I think we'd all agree that the standard of discourse has disimproved over the last 3 decades. I mean, you and I will remember in the 90s opening the Irish Times, and it was, or the Irish Independent, and it was it was the kind of like the go-to source for information in the country. And unfortunately, the internet has come in and corroded the art of journalism, and journalism back then was a very kind of cerebral, heavily researched. There was thought, there was analysis, and that sort of thing. And unfortunately, the internet has just corroded that, and it has replaced, very complex issues with bite-sized pay-per-click, clickbait headlines, which are, it's akin to a toddler describing a messy divorce. I mean, very complex set of circumstances reduced to simplified 12 word headlines, which,
Yeah.
the consumer consumes while they're having their sandwich, flicking through their phone at, at their lunch break.
Yeah.
And the problem is that a lot of perceptions and a lot of narratives can be formed from negative headlines that do not even connect to the substance of the article, but are just
Yeah.
designed to generate clicks that are paid per clicks. And, it's what happens is that, you effectively have people not reading past the headline.
Mm.
And the level of the discourse has reduced. And I mean, the problem with the free media model is that nobody's paying for depth. And so nobody's producing the depth. So nobody's consuming the depth. And the problem is when it actually gets to a complex set of circumstances, you have to actually reset the narrative very, very quickly and
Yeah.
ensure that, well-reasoned, positions are understood, particularly with respect to anything technical or complex. And look, I mean, it's not just, shall we say, the my end of the industry that's experienced. It's permeates throughout. I mean, it goes into a wider discussion around politics, and I mean, I feel very sorry for politicians right now because I mean, the level of abuse they get online.
Mm.
And they're in fairness, they're working every hour God gives them,
Yeah.
and they're trying to do their best. And I'd say if you're an elected official and you Google your own name, you'd be depressed after about 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Just and the discourse. We need to, I think, as a society, we need to be a bit better on the discourse, and we need to avoid the reductive simplifications.
Yeah. So that's your, I mean, your challenge then really is to tell the Kingspan story and the good stuff about Kingspan and the net zero and the green and what you're doing, I mean, the culture and the bit what you're trying to get to, and you're competing then against this narrative, in social media that's, obviously not is tarnishing it probably. That's it. Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, I'm fortunate in that there's a very good story to tell.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to be. There's a lot of great things that, so I'm in the fortunate position I can point to what Kingspan has done in terms of its sustainability agenda, and I'd say we're best in class on that. I mean, we have our head of sustainability, Bianca Wong, I would say is an absolute rock star in terms of what she's achieved in putting together a best in class sustainability offering, which I would argue personally, I'd say leads the industry in terms of its scope and in terms of its breadth. So in terms of the what we're doing, I have a lot of good news to tell, which puts
Yeah.
me in a fortunate position. But it's ensuring that the signal is heard rather than the
Of course.
noise.
Absolutely. So I mean, going on from that then, what are you most excited about then?
I mean, that's the perfect segue because what I'm
Mm.
excited about, there's a lot to be excited about. And I'd say if I were to exhaust this list, we'd be here for the day, you and I, but
Yeah.
I'll try and keep it short. Look, I mean, going back to growth, I mean, where we are, I'm excited about where we are as a company. I mean,
Yeah.
11th consecutive years of growth, it's no accident. We have a visionary management team. They have a great knack for hiring good teams who are motivated, dedicated, and who are committed to driving the business forward. And I mean, if you're in the departures terminal at 5:30 on a Monday morning, in Dublin Airport, you'll
Yeah.
see lads and ladies from Kingspan just
Mm.
hitting to the four corners of the
Yeah.
the world to run businesses. And there's a very common enthusiasm and excitement with that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
hard on the body, but everyone loves doing it.
Yeah.
In terms of our products, I'm excited about their impact,
Mm.
and the great thing about this job is that the products that you're making and that are being made by our colleagues are having a meaningful impact on the world in which we exist. Now, 38% of greenhouse gas emissions come from the built environment. And that's something that everybody overlooks. And look,
Yeah.
Chris, you'll know from the transport game, everybody
Yeah.
likes to point the finger at the road fleet
Fossil
and
fuel. Yeah.
farming and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But everybody overlooks the fact that 38% of the emissions come from the built environment. And our mission is to accelerate a net zero emission built environment. And to that point, I mean, the insulation products that we produce in 2025 over the course of their useful projected life will reduce the building output of the buildings in which they're included by about 219 million tons of carbon. Now that's nation size in terms of carbon emissions, you know. So it's a fantastic one. I'd refer everyone on the call when they have 5 minutes to
Yeah.
just look at our Planet Passionate report. It's on our website. It's a fantastic read. You'll enjoy it. And I mean, that details how we recycle about 1 billion PET cola bottles a year to include as raw material. So that's stuff that isn't going into seas, that
Yeah.
isn't going into landfill. You know, it's going back into the product, is being put back in. I'm excited as well. We've
Good.
reduced scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gas emissions by 70% since 2020, you know, which, and again, back to the hard work of our sustainability
Mm.
team. I mean, Chris, they have put in a serious shift in the last few years,
Yeah.
you know, and have put together what I'd argue is a best in class proposition. So look, I could go on, Chris, but there's a lot to be excited
Yeah,
about.
no, I think I know you're very excited about the data centers. That's a big part of your business, you know, a huge part, and it's booming, you know, out there as well. And it was very interesting what you said earlier on about that you can do like, you know, from start to finish. The only thing you can't do is a Cat 5, but you can do everything else. That's amazing, you know, that you can actually do that. I mean, and there's so much misconception in Ireland about data centers as well, and we all know we need them. But obviously, I mean, Kingspan are pushing ahead and driving that right across the world, aren't you? It's fascinating
Across
what
the
they're
world,
doing.
Chris. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, and particularly in the States as well. I mean, we're expanding our footprint there massively, and I mean to that point, you know, everybody has a mobile phone.
Yeah.
Everybody has, and I mean, if we think back to 20, 30 years ago, for any of us who kind of worked in kind of like any multinational corporate,
Yeah.
you'll have walked into a floor of an office building that would have been racks and racks and racks and racks of servers.
Yeah.
Everything's gone to the cloud. The cloud has to sit somewhere. Those
Yes.
servers have to sit somewhere. And the data center industry right now is, you know, it's universally applicable in that it underpins the networks on which we operate. But in terms of our involvement, we've been very lucky to have a great name for producing on spec, on time, the equipment and the materials that our clients need.
Yeah.
And because of the, shall we say, the intensity of the space, you know, that reputational strength is something that our clients just lean on. And they know that when they deal with us, that, you know, that we're headache free, you know, because at the end of the day, when you're doing a massive multi-billion investment, you want to know that you can depend on your partners, you can depend on the people supplying
Yes.
into you, and you know that the headache-free reputation that we've maintained in that space, that has been a key driver of our commercial success.
Right. I mean, and just on that, then in France, obviously, you know, 47 sites. Do they make the same type of products in France as they make right across the world, or is it specific to one type of product? Just I'm interested in that bit.
We've a very diverse product
Yeah.
set in France, Chris. I mean, I think of Lyon, and we've got an excellent. Our light air and water division is headed up by Raoul Roth down there,
Yeah.
an excellent business leader there, French guy who's developed, you know, the whole kind of product set across France in the light air and water space. So skylights, smoke ventilations, extraction
Right.
systems, all that good happy stuff. We've got panel plants as far north as Dunkirk, as far south as Perpignan.
Right.
And those are for the
Wow.
structural insulated panels that you
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
in the big box warehouses. We also have what we call the single skin, which would be the single sheet that you'd
Yeah.
see on the shed roofs as well,
Yeah.
produced there. And we also have our roofing and waterproofing division there. So we've got a full suite
Good.
of products
Very
being
good.
manufactured across France. And you know, it's a strategically important market for us, a key
Good.
market.
Good. So I suppose that leads me on to, you know, you've had a great career and you're obviously you love your job, very passionate about your job. So what's the one thing you know now that you'd wish you'd known 5 years ago? Like going back 5 years ago, which is I wish I'd known that then, you know, that I know it now.
Well, look, I mean, 5 years ago it was in the height of the pandemic, and
Yeah.
it's one of those things that, I mean, if you look to history, where we get to is often, you know, fairly predictable.
Mm.
And I mean, if you look at the coming out of COVID, you know, with a huge amount of government spending, and it was how that would impact on interest rates and so on and so forth. But I suppose in a way, I'd re-characterize that question. What I would what I wish I knew 20 years ago
Okay.
when I was a young fella, because you always kind of you're always pushing yourself very hard, and you're
Mm,
always kind of you're probably I'm my own worst critic,
right.
and I think if I met my the 20-year-old self today, I'd say, look, trust in the process,
Yeah.
hard work, good attitude will help you get on in life. And don't overly worry about it. The challenge, of course, of that, Chris, is that if I met the 20-year-old self today, he wouldn't listen to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Okay.
that would
Yeah.
be the advice I'd give to the 20-year-old self.
Very good. And you don't strike me as someone, you don't. Do you worry at all? Do you worry?
Look, Chris, worry is one of the most powerful engines of progress if you harness it
Yeah.
correctly. And I mean, look, one man's worry is another man's cognitive analysis of the circumstances in which he finds himself,
Yeah.
And there's a difference between kind of, I suppose I would categorize it as scenario analysis, right?
Mm,
And I think the to particularly in complex industries, you have to be constantly analyzing, constantly thinking about it, constantly trying to, determine. I mentioned Black Swans earlier,
yeah.
and I think the reason that that book was so popular was because, it distinguished between curveball events that we can't control, like coronavirus,
Yeah.
9/11, from run-of-the-mill foreseeable disruptions. And it's the run-of-the-mill foreseeable disruptions that worry can help most. So it's the worry would be the kind of the mind's early warning system for
Yeah.
foreseeable disruptions. It compels us to kind of scan the horizons, to kind of interrogate our assumptions, and to stress test the approach we are taking to business, and in that way mitigate future risks. So when I'm, shall we say, lying awake at night thinking about work, it's not succumbing to anxiety. It's
Right.
interrogating scenarios, and it's thinking things through, and it's reverse engineering the thought process in the head, sometimes to plan ahead, sometimes to improve. So
Right.
it's I'd call it a wellspring of innovation rather than anything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, no, I seem like you're always on, aren't you? You're always switched on. I think you're very focused in what you do. You're constantly thinking about what you're at, the process. I think you went back to the word you used, process earlier on, the process. And you said you can't deal with the unforeseen, but you can deal with, the predictables. They're the thing. And that's you seem to enjoy that, I think.
Well, I it's I'm always on, Chris.
Yeah.
There's no off switch. So it's look, when you enjoy what you do, it's kind
Mm.
of, and I think the secret in life is to find the enjoyable bits of what you do.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
You know.
And one last question for you, and I always throw this in. I was going,
Oh, go
growing
on.
up, what did you want to be as a little fella up in Roscommon? What did you want to be?
Do you know, one of my favorite print ads of all time was run by Fiat in the late 90s, and it had a picture of a Fiat Coupe Turbo on a double fold of magazines with the
Mm,
caption across the top, "No one in Italy dreams up becoming a train driver." You know,
right.
and my youth would have been very much centered around cars, and you have these unrealistic dreams of pursuing professional sport. In my case, I'd a wild notion that I would do a lot of rallying. But sometimes at around 15, 16, pragmatism gives way, and you start, pursuing career options that give you, for want of a better word, optionality. So I'd say at about 17, 18, I decided to probably, for want of a better idea, pursue law.
Okay.
Studied law in Galway. Graduated in '08. Bad timing to graduate. So
Yeah.
went back and did a master's in international banking and finance law in London in 2009. And look, from that, it's kind of, I experienced in Singapore, Prague, London,
Okay.
a lot of time in the US, working across law firms, banks, and that sort of thing. But it kind of, there was always, I suppose, a commercial edge to me as a kid,
Yeah.
and I would have, worked informally around small businesses and machinery and
Right.
car dealerships and things like that. And I suppose it's one of the best educations you'll ever get, dealing with the general public at an early
Right.
age and putting the putting the commercial realities into practice.
No, that's really interesting. And look, we're at the end now, and Anthony, it's fascinating to talk to you. I think that little bit of that rally driver is still in you. I think that speed. I think you have that drive and that passion. There's a bit of wildness about you as well to take risks. You can see it in you. It's still in. So it's been fantastic talking to you today. I've got a bit more insight into you. I knew this was going to be really interesting. I hope everybody that's listened in, and it will be put up on the website later on, the recording, will listen back, because you're a fascinating character with a great story to tell, working for a great company, and you're great patrons as well of the France Ireland Chamber of Commerce. So Anthony, thank you very much for to talking to me today.
Thanks for having us, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.